Come on, y'all. True House Stories on a Wednesday, baby. New York City style. United States style. 2 p.m., as I always promise, each and every week, right here. I can't say in the greatest radio station in the world, but I will say this, right in your home, as your guys are the greatest of all. You're our fans who religiously come each and every week to hear the eulogy and homily from myself and all the wonderful guests that I've been blessed to have on our stage. And it's funny the way this stage has worked. COVID's a mother, right? Everybody says COVID's a mother effer. But I'll tell you something. The wonderful thing about COVID was brought us all together, including all of you at home. So I want to tell you that it's not forgotten that each and every week, and now we're on to episode 64. 64. Put that into consideration. 64 episodes, 64 weeks. We've been grinding to make this show be seen by all of you so that you all can enjoy this great programming. We're kind of like BBC and PBS. We come to your door with our hand and our hearts open, and we love you for it. So, welcome to True House Stories. I am Lenny Fontana coming out of NYC. And this week, this man has been sitting on the sidelines waiting to come and tell this rich dance music story. He's of Caribbean background and Jamaican, if I remember correctly. He's a talented brother, very talented. He has done many things, and he's going to tell you about it in a moment. But I want to say this so we're clear. There's a bunch of people that are involved with Technotronic. He happens to be one of the co-founding guys that's behind the scenes with Technotronic. And we're going to get clarified clearly to what the hell was going on with that group, but he will tell us himself. So from all the way from the UK, and some of you who live in the UK and your homeland, I'd like to introduce one of our brothers to the stage, the co-founder of Technotronic and all. Here he is himself, Mr. Eric Martin. Yo, what up, bro? What's up? What's up?
So good to be here, man. Thanks for having me on, Len.
I know you waited a long time. I remember, your PA saying to me, Lenny, is that the first date you can give us? Unfortunately, the list is crazy, the people that want to get on this show, but I'm going to say this to you. I am lucky to have you on this show because you happen to be one of our architects, or should I say engineers, to how this all began, especially when this type of music popped over into the pop charts.
Yeah. Nice.
But we will say, and I ask everyone the first question, even before we start, how are you coping through COVID? Because it's been a long road for a lot of us. You want to share that before we get started?
Man, the COVID thing is a few things to say about that. One thing is it was pretty bad in the UK, especially at the start of it. We got hit quite hard, and our prime minister wasn't really. Well, he was indecisive. He wasn't really making the best decisions. And there was a lot of stuff going on. But to cut a long story short, I got it quite early. And it was quite frightening. At one point I had, because my family in Jamaica, we have a WhatsApp group. And at one point, I had certain members of my family in the WhatsApp group praying for me, man. It was, it was difficult. I had a difficult time with it, but I came through it. If I'm honest, I'm not entirely 100% even now. I think there's probably still some scarring on my lungs, if I'm honest.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Each day is a blessing. It's like I was saying to you earlier, man, like this is real. We have lost real people, and it upsets me a little when people say, oh, don't take the vaccine, or don't do this, or don't do that. And it's like, look, man, we've lost people. You couldn't tell a family member of someone who's actually died that this isn't real, right? So my COVID situation wasn't great, but now I'm just feeling blessed that I'm good and everything's cool.
You didn't get on that iron lung, right? We didn't go that far.
No.
Okay, good.
No.
That's the worry factor for everybody in the beginning. They were throwing and intubating people right away.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know what to do. They wanted to put you out and they wanted to get you under the iron lung. And that thing, I guess when you're at the door of no turning back, I guess if that's the only thing you can do, then you have to accept what you're dealt. But in your case, it looks like you got pretty close to that threshold line. And
things were bad. Things were bad. I mean, there was a good 10-day period where maybe a week where I was convinced this is it. Like, this is it. This is it. This is my ending. So
did you ever go to the hospital or you stood at home all the way through it?
Well, I got it at a time where they just started telling us to basically ride it out. That was it.
Isn't that amazing? Don't worry, you'll be fine. Stay home, relax.
Yeah. That was it.
Just you'll be okay. You'll be fine. I mean, it's like, don't worry. Don't come here. Don't come here.
Basically,
stay there.
Yeah.
And call us if it gets really bad.
Yeah. Good advice, maybe, given that the hospitals were pretty dangerous places to be, right?
Well, the best was when the prime minister got it, in the sense that, he played the role that it was not real. Yeah. And then his life was pretty much at a point where it was over. Yeah. And he explains, and I remember him talking about the one nurse that stood with him day and night. Sure, you're on the other side of the whole thing. You're in the best care money can buy. Of course. I give it to her, the nurse that stood with you, because it's like the president of the United States. They're going to pull out and roll out every possible miracle drug and every great thing to keep that person alive. You could be sure. And they did with him.
Yeah, it's crazy. It really was a crazy time in terms of what politically speaking, how it went down. Our prime minister, the NHS still are actually under a lot of strain, in need of lots of assistance from the government. And he's asking us to clap for them, as if that can somehow help them. So there's some pretty messed up things going on. Bolsonaro in Brazil, convinced that it just didn't mean anything, or it was easy to deal with, or it was nothing at all. And, lots of people died. A lot of people died, and I took that personally because I have a lot of friends in Brazil, and a lot of people died, and there's blood on the hands of some leaders who made the wrong decisions. That's about as far as I can go with that.
All right, thank you for your political contribution, and thank you for as well being our correspondent from the foreign side of the United Kingdom, and giving us your perspective. And we do appreciate that, because you were on the ground when it did happen and you were actually sick. And you know what? You came back. Some of us know others that just didn't make it, and some that are not going to make it. And it's just the way it is. And we got to pray and hope for the best and keep smiling. I keep smiling, because you know what? It ain't over till it's really over.
Yeah. It's true.
On that note, we want to get right into what we came here to do. Clear up all issues. Any questions, we'll get it out today. So, everybody, Lenny always asks the same question. It's a very basic question. Those that watch the show know that I'm going to ask this question. How does Music Eric find you as a young man, young kid? Where does it begin for you, or how do you find it, in that manner?
I think... I have a few answers to that question, depending on what sort of music we're talking about. I mean, going way back, my dad was a pastor. So I grew up in church, and, my first exposure to music was gospel. And then, all the stuff that comes with being from a religious family. So there were certain tunes that certain people who were making songs we could play, and there were certain songs that we couldn't play. If the general consensus in my household was that if it was reggae music was given a pass, right? That was allowed. But even that was allowed to a point. Like Bob Marley was allowed because Bob Marley was, he was singing righteously. But there was certain, Peter Tosh was another conversation. So, there was that side of it. But my earliest memory of like wanting to be a part of the music industry was I was 9 years old, and I heard a song by the Crusaders called Street Life. And at the time, it was the Crusaders. It wasn't, I don't think it was billed as Randy Crawford until afterwards when it first came. And I heard that tune, Street Life, at that age. And I begged my mother to buy it for me. And so that was, I guess, the first, sort of tune that I purchased, I guess. I didn't have my own money. I was 9. But that was the moment when I realized people could make music of that caliber in a group. And I was, from that point on, it was just, that was it. Okay, moving forward, I left, I'm from Wales. When I'm away and I tell people I'm from Wales, they, some people, depending on where you go, especially if you're in somewhere like Brazil, South America, they're like, where's that? What is that? Wales, where I come from, the city of Cardiff is 2 hours from London. And so a lot of us were back and forth a lot. I got kicked out of school when I was a kid, and I ended up in high school in London. And so I knew from the time I was in high school that I would probably spend the rest of my life there. When I discovered music as someone who wanted to make a career out of it, I think I was about 16. I was working with a very, very dear friend of mine, practically a brother, a guy called Jaffa, Jason Farrell, DJ Jaffa, they call him. And he was the first DJ I had ever seen with my own 2 eyes, cutting and scratching and doing everything that the boys down in Bristol were doing and all of that. And it was just like, I was awestruck by him. I was like, maybe 15, 16 when I bumped into him, and I was just awestruck by his skill set and his knowledge of music and his ability to sort of always import great songs from the States and things like that. So that was my first kind of, okay, this is great. I ended up leaving Wales for the last time around 1986, and I went into London alone and under dodgy circumstances, which I really won't go into because obviously sometimes you can't tell a story without destroying your heroes. So I'll just say I went into London and I roughed it for a bit of couch hopping, bit homelessness. I don't know, how deep I can go, but there was.
My brother, you can go as deep as you need to go.
Yeah, no, it's good. So
wherever you feel comfortable sharing with us, do not. My silence is me taking this all in. I'm like at home. I'm going to ask the questions people at home are going to ask soon. You'll see.
Oh, that's good. So
how deep are we talking? Now, I want to know. We talk about 1986. We hear Run DMC on the radio. What's good? Give us a landscape of what was going on around you. Everything.
Okay. So, when I first decided to leave and enter London for the second time after high school, I popped out. I came back in. When I decided to come back in, Run DMC had already released Sucker MCs and. That this had already happened. The sort of order of the day was listening to anything that Rick Rubin had made, and also anything that Kraftwerk had made. These sorts of really cool things. My personal hero as well was Curtis Mantronic. And the reason why he was my hero, well, there were lots of reasons, but apart from his musical talent, he was the only Jamaican I knew that was producing electronic music, aside from reggae music. He was the only Jamaican I knew. So, and I can see from your face, you didn't realize he was a Jamaican, right?
No, I knew that, but I was going to say to you, what about Eddie Grant?
Right, but Eddie Grant was making reggae.
You know what I'm saying? Like Eddie Grant for us was champion in New York. But that's
right.
Okay. It's your story. Go ahead.
But aside from like outside of reggae music, right? He was the guy that made anyone who was, maybe West Indian of, origin. We're looking at him and we're thinking, boy, what's going on here? And then you delve a bit deeper, and you realize that our culture was at the forefront of hip hop, and you're like, well, wait, I have a claim. I can claim some of this. So I moved into to London. The situation wasn't great. I didn't want to be around any family, I didn't want to do that. So I would couch up a few nights. I did the Hyde Park thing, slept in Hyde Park or whatever. I don't know if anyone listening can remember. They probably don't know, but Hyde Park used to open at like 5:45 in the morning. So I used to hang out in Oxford Street, little skinny kid, talking to people after, talking to the bouncers, talking to DJs, talking to whoever I could talk to, just to get as close to 6 o'clock as I possibly could, so that I didn't have to, that I could go into the park and sit down and whatever. So it was tough times, bro. It was tough times. And then after that, after a while, I ended up, hooking up with my sister. My sister was like, look, you can't live like that. That's not cool. And this particular sister happened to be, someone who cared about me a hell of a lot. So, I ended up then I sort of got into a situation where I hooked up with a dude called Alfred Giacuno, who was like, look, why don't you just come and do whatever it is you want to do, and let's see if we can hook something up for you. And at that point, I got back in touch with my dear friend Jaffa, and called him up. But it wasn't rosy. It was difficult for us. We spent the next year or so struggling. I remember we thought we were rich, right? Because we got signed to a record label for like £2,000 or something, and we thought we were like, you know what? Mom, you don't have to work again. Wait
a second. Coming from nothing, £2,000 is tremendous amount.
Yeah, man. So that was that, and it was something like that. Anyway, I could be getting the figure wrong, but it was something like that. Anyway, we did a few bits and pieces. The thing with me, when I think about my movement through the industry, I was very fortunate to have had, I call them uncles, right? Danny D, Jazzy B. These guys were my uncles. Trenton Harrison, Cliff White. These people were guys who were 10 or so years older than me, maybe 8 years old or whatever. And they were already doing it.
No, let's not forget. Hang on. Danny D was at Cool Tempo already at that point.
Listen, Danny D was the man. I mean, he
was around already. He was stroking heavy.
Danny D, like, I wouldn't be like, and I guess, Technotronic wouldn't have been what it was. Danny D, I can't say enough about that guy. Was always very, very encouraging. And he gave me my first job as a producer ever. I think it was 1987. I produced a track for a rap group called the We Papa Girl Rappers. That Danny, and Danny gave me the reins on that. And that was my first production ever for anyone other than myself. And I think I was 16 or something something like that. So Danny, I got nothing but love for Danny. It was amazing. And those sorts of relationships, right? They're exclusive to you and that person. So you can't really, properly articulate how much that means to you, right? So it's one of those situations where I'm just grateful to have had that happen. After a short while, Danny introduced me to Trenton Harrison, who again, I can't sing enough praises for that guy. It's an interesting one when you deal with people from certain walks of life. The music industry is the only industry in the world, entertainment industry, where people feel they can wake up and give themselves a title. Everywhere else, you got to go to uni, you got to go to college, you got to get things, but you can wake up and decide that, hey, I'm a manager. You can wake up and decide, hey, I'm a music, but you can just decide. And it doesn't mean you can do it. It just means you've made But in those days, everybody was winging it. So the book was being written, and I can't stress to the younger generation enough how there wouldn't have been, things like Splice if there weren't conversations over boardroom tables with the likes of, Paul Spraggan, David Glick, Trenton Harrison, Leo Cohen, Burt Padell. These guys were trying to bring in law that were making the things possible that the likes of Splice are enjoying right now, in terms of how do we find a happy medium here where the person that has just sampled this record is actually not going to be walking home penniless after having made a great track with 2 seconds of our tune. So all of these things were all happening. So everyone in those days was winging it. And apart from, the sort of conventional managers of the traditional sense, like the George Martin, the Beatles, and people like that, apart from those guys, the younger dudes, the Trenton Harrisons, the Danny D's, the Ray Cosberts, those guys were determined to do it right, but at the same time, they were having to learn as they went. They were learning on the go, So I've got nothing but
there's a reason for that. Okay, there's a reason for that. Now I'm going to make everybody understand that for a second. The first record that has a tremendous amount of samples, UK based, hits American shores, nothing is cleared, was a CJ McIntosh pump up the jam. Pump up the volume. I was going to say pump the jam. Sorry, it's just so funny to pump. So Chris McIntosh produces this track.
Yeah.
He's got James Brown. He's even got my friend at the time, Carlos Cordova, with him laughing, and they sampled every record from Jive to James Brown.
Yeah, the kitchen sink, man.
So what happened was, pre to that, mind you, everyone, sampling was samples of a piano sound. They were playing it. Yeah. Now this was samples that all of a sudden were put together in one single, like 35 samples.
Yeah.
And the record goes pop international around the world. Blows the F up. Blows up bigger than life. That's what he's talking about. So guys like Paul Spraggan and all these guys come to the table and say, whoa, hang on. We got to quickly, got to figure this out. And because that was a nightmare, man, everybody came out of the woodwork. Dude, people were pissed.
Listen, it was crazy. I remember some scorchers, man. They had a law that came in, I think in the late 90s, where they prohibited, like you could not, I think it was the 2-second rule, where you could play a hit and not be, sued for it. But prior to that rule, people were taking you to the cleaners for a snare drum. They were taking you to the cleaners for a snare drum, or James Brown saying, and you use that, you're screwed. So it was a very, very interesting time. But at the same time, looking back now, I know now that we were privileged to have come up through that, because the problems of today are new and exclusive to today, but they're not the problems that we dealt with, which have made the industry the way it is now, right? So
because prior to us coming up, there was no technology accessible for guys that had no money. Think about that. Everybody that was coming up at that time was basically with lint in their pants, not coins. So if they got their hands on a sampler and started to lift records, they were thrilled. And remember, we only had 8 seconds of sampling time. And that was like tremendous.
Lenny said lint, Lenny brought lint back, man.
Listen to Uncle Lenny. Lint, not coins. Lint in your pants. But it's true, because that means you didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, because mostly everybody I remember had no money when we were starting.
That's right. And, again, just getting back to the whole thing, what you just said, the social conditions were, massively determined what direction you went in. People who were a little more sort of uptight and angry and unable to set down the weight of the shit that life has thrown at them, they made hip hop. People who were still from those conditions and were still pissed but were all about having a good time, they made house. But the conditions were the same. The conditions were the same. It's just that the people were very different. And if you look at the type of people that came into the house fraternity from the other backgrounds, from the middle class backgrounds and all, you would see where most of those people would go. And but with those social conditions comes a lot of coolness. So to take an example from our era, if you look at something like Planet Rock. So you look at Planet Rock now and you're thinking, right, what's happening there? Arthur Baker comes from a very different background to, Bam and them. And you've got a situation where you have one set of people that are coming into the studio not quite caring what's going to happen, but they're bringing that vibe, they're bringing that flavor, and it's very street. And then you got this other dude who's got Fairlight, which is the only sampler really around at the time, and it just had a few seconds on it that you could take. Big old machine that cost thousands of pounds. And he sampled Trans Europe. Is it Trans Europe Express? Trans Europa. People watching this now and they're saying, "Oh my God, yeah, Kraftwerk." Sorry, guys.
That's all right.
I had a blank.
Trans Europe Express.
So he's come in and he's taken that and he's flung it together, and then the rappers have done what they've done on the top, and then you have this tune which is like at the dawn of sort of popular hip hop, at the very dawn of it, and it's massive and it's huge, and it would not have happened were it not for those two completely separate social conditions clashing together, and it's the beauty of what we came through, what we're doing. My favorite house music producers have always been those who can walk that line. I've never been the polished sort of, I respect it. I respect the clean stuff. I respect, the low pass filter on everything. I respect it, but I'm more of a Kenny Dope, Todd Terry type of guy, a Roger Sanchez type of guy. I like to hear you've been through the muck, man. When you put a tune together, I like to hear what touches me, where I know there's someone involved who is maybe 80% caring about what music is supposed to do, but there's a 20% side of that person that's still rebellious, that still doesn't really care whether that thing is in tune or not, or whether it's perfectly aligned with the other thing on the grid or not, And I like that. I like the grit, but that's just me. That's my personal my personal thing, and it's what we attempted to do with the Technotronic stuff. Really, was the sort of take everything from hip hop, take everything from Afrobeat, in the traditional sense, in the Fela Kuti Kassav sense of Afrobeat, not in the new stuff. But to have that sort of mixture of those incredible genres of music and stick them together in a using house as a vehicle. And I think to this day it's always impressive when someone can pull that off.
The thing is that you had street credibility because you lived the street level. So you were able to share that experience through the melodies and the rhythms. That's so important. That's what makes that music stand out. It's got that bite. It's not fluffy. It's tough. It's rough. It's what that is. It's got to be that way. And people who came to hear it and dance, they can relate. Yeah.
It doesn't take itself. It doesn't take itself too seriously. The first Technotronic album does not take itself too seriously. It's not. I always call it the unapologetic album, because that kick drum is just not apologizing for anything. It's just there, smack in your face, boom, boom, and everything around it is paying homage to it, and it's not afraid to stomp in that way. And I guess that slight variance that makes it that sound that way is the European element of what we were doing, because there is a European element to what we were doing. So in addition to everything else, helping to make that all a little different. And I think there's something to be said as well, Len, for simplicity. My philosophy is that if you have one snare to choose from, you're going to do something really cool with it, because it's all you've got. Whereas if you're going to sit there and go through sounds, try this, try that,
Please search for part 2 of this podcast on the platform you're watching or listening to. And please do not forget to follow us.